Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Grown Man Clash, and today I want to talk about a topic that's been hitting headlines besides, Caitlyn Jenner, who used to be called Bruce Jenner, now it's called Caitlyn Jenner. But now I want to talk about something that happened down in McKinney, Texas, and that was an incident involving a pool party where black kids were being targeted by the police after, an altercation happened between a white adult and a black teenager. Now, people call this, racial based, which I do see that myself. Some people actually think that, this is like a separate incident, like this is nothing new, which is true. But the reason why it caught my eye was because, you know, if you know me, you know how much I love my history, and the way it goes and ties back. Even even it goes back to when there were segregated pools. Now people say that we live in an integrated time. I don't really believe that because, judging by the actions of the white adults and the stereotypes and how the way they believe that these kids live in Section 8 homes, like they live in, what we call the ghetto. And the real sad part is the fact that the stereotypes go inside these people's heads, even to the point that some black citizens are willing to defend these people. And I'm just like, wait a minute, hold up. And don't get me wrong, this is not entirely like a black white thing, but but I remember when the whole thing went down, there was a white kid that was actually recording the whole thing. Now, the older generation is not going to help solve this problem. It's not going to help, erase the scars of racism. It's going to be us or the future generation. Because, mom's generation, grandpa's generation, great grandpa's generation, man, they were indoctrinated and whipped by the same damn thing. So, honestly, they can't even help us. We got to help ourselves. Now, besides that, the, the kid who was recording the incident in question was, in fact, of European descent. Now, the reason why I mentioned that was because I remember I watched the interview where he was, being taped, being recorded, talking about how the way, like, there were white kids right over there too, but they would pass by as if they were invisible, but the cops targeted solely on the children of African descent. Now, that's an interesting topic because it harkens back to what I mentioned before about about segregation of pools in schools, and segregation of bars, gas stations, hotels, motels, you name it. Segregation happened. Now, this is nothing new, and I remember one of my old teachers from high school before she retired. You know, she retired. She's retired now, but she showed me an article about how the way there was segregation of the pools long before this incident even happened, and it is. And truth be told, I forgot all about the pools, but I always knew that. But I, I already knew that there was going to be segregation right then and there. But it's very funny that people always want to claim that things change, integration happened, everything is well and dandy. We got white kids and black kids getting together, but at the same time, you know, when you think about integration and segregation, the only thing that's segregated are the fact that the opportunities are segregated, and you know, coming together is segregated, even though the coming together and segregation are utterly opposite. But the only thing integrated are actually problems for us, and you know more solutions for other types of people. But the stereotypes are becoming more integrated. The methods are becoming more integrated. But now you may ask, how does this tie in with the pool incident, and how the way the pool tied in with how the American Fight Book? Well, if you know your history, if you know American history and how the way America was brought up on the very same thing, it was brought up on the stereotype that black people or people who were not either of Northern European descent, or that's not even of European descent. Well, you not of the founding settler pilgrimage, no, not pilgrims, Pilgrim Puritan descent, they were considered to be savages. Hence why, in some cases, if you remember about, biasness towards like Irish and Italian immigrants, in the United States, they were also, European descent as well, but they were looked at in a very negative light. But now, bringing on to that, and how the way segregation came right down to not only to the image of how the way these people portrayed, children of African descent. And to make matters even funnier, like I read somewhere before that the woman in question who was beating up on the the African American girl, or African in American Africans in America, you catch my drift. But to bring that into question, she was throwing racial slurs at her, cursing her out, as if she didn't have any sense, and telling her like go back to your Section 8 homes or something like that. And even the girl, well known, just told her, I live in this neighborhood. My mom is right down the street. I don't live in Section 8. Basically, it also goes right down to stereotypes and how the way the whole stereotypical thing about, African children, Africans here in America, there's no such thing as an African American. So where'd that come from? Africans in America, they are looked at as savages. They are looked at as troublemakers. They are looked at as, people who live on welfare, knowing damn well the fact that majority of the people who are on welfare are actually, if not lighter, but who are paler than me, or should I say, people who are of European descent. And now, if some of you say, like, what are you trying to do? You trying to play off the race card or something? I'm like, no, I'm not. Just hear me out. And if you do your research, it's true. Majority of people who are on welfare are actually people who are rich and white, because they want to save some money and they need the amount of assistance that they can get. But let me turn around for a minute. See that right there? The TV? People will follow that damn thing and not solve any of the other problems. They would rather look into indoctrinated bullshit in order to look at each other and look at the various lifestyles and the various cultures that people live through. But at the same time, you gotta ask yourself, why? Why are people so engrossed in that TV right there, instead of just looking at each other and sitting down and talk? And it goes by what Malcolm X once said. The media is the most powerful entity in the world. It has the power to make the innocent look guilty and make the guilty look innocent. And that's where power lies in. Malcolm X. And that's the reason why they were targeted by the cops. And even then, I remember I was watching a bit of an interview, and it was a bit of a discussion how the way they were talking about how the way this cop was supposedly a disciplined martial artist, and how the way he was supposed to be very composed, even supposed to be an outstanding citizen. How the way they try to butter up some people and try to make them look out more than what they actually are. You gotta hate that, even if it's in your favor. But here's another thing that hits me real hard. If you've seen the video, you literally see the cop, who's supposed to be very disciplined and even a model citizen, running after it and trips. Oh man, how do you trip trying to chase teenagers? And funny enough, if you see the video, they were actually targeting, the children of African descent, even though they were teenagers. And yeah, well, they were teenagers. And he said, "Sir, I wasn't doing anything." You could clearly hear them speaking very properly and very clearly. They were not being disruptive. They were not being rude. They were definitely not being, any kind of way belligerent. But yet, here's this officer saying, "Yo, shut up and sit down." I'm just like, whoa. You can't say that to somebody, especially if they haven't broken any kind of law whatsoever. So now, you gotta ask yourself, And these so-called law officers, and to make matters even, worse, was the fact that these so-called officers of the law, the ones that we place our hands into and trying to make sure that they keep us safe. I put that in quotations, safe, because if you look throughout history, especially those who lived here and they were of African descent, you will realize that the police officers never really had our backs. They looked at us as savages. They still had that type of programming that they had back when they introduced us here in America. In chains, they said, "Look at these savages. They're not human beings. Look at their skin color." And like I said, it goes right back to that, to the TV. Now, why would even officers are indoctrinated to believe in this shit right here? They literally believe that what they see on TV is what you get in real life. In some cases, I remember I was reading something about some law officers and how the way officers who show like higher intelligence quotients, and they actually understand and talk with the people, they are less likely to get hired. And those who are also of African descent, they are less likely to get hired because I remember I read something somewhere that they are in jail or they are scared to become an officer because they're already being discriminated against, the very same people that they want to aspire to be, but they're also being discriminated against because of how the way they look and how the way they are perceived through stereotypes. Now, some of you may ask, how does all of this tie into what happened in McKinney, Texas? And I mentioned it all before, and how the way everything comes right down to history, context, and everything. And it's very funny because some people even mention that, and this is a quote: "If you don't learn your history, you oftentimes repeat it." And whether they try to teach you through these movies and all that bullshit, what? History is for nerds. Being smart is for nerds. And doing all that other crap, man, and knowing the fact that being brilliant is the only way to stop the suffering of many people. And if you realize the fact that many brilliant minds, not strong bodies, but brilliant minds and great minds were taken out and destroyed. Not people who were strong, not people who were, who had the strength. And for those who are movie buffs, remember the great debaters? Now, remember what Denzel Washington said: "Keep the slave physically strong, but psychologically weak." Now, some of you may say, how the hell can there be slavery? Why the hell are you bringing up slavery for? Well, let's put it like this. Slavery doesn't always have to be consistent with the physical way. Such as, being in chains, being shackled, getting whipped, beaten. But the greatest travesty that came out of slavery, not only that, was actually the mental damage, the mental constraint, the fact that they had to indoctrinate the people in order to think a certain way. And it happened on both sides. The blacks were taught to believe that they were inferior, and the whites were taught to believe that they were superior. Now, some of you may say, how does this tie in with McKinney, Texas? Now, like I said before, it's years and years and years of brainwashing and conditioning. And now, this is nothing new. I mentioned about segregated pools, schools, bars, towns, hell, let's put it like this. Even if integration was supposedly the cure, look at how many problems it's spreading. The drug war, government not helping out people who look like me or who are brown, red, yellow, whoever it is. They're damn near not helping out poor people. So the only thing that integrated was just an image, not a solution. Because if solutions were to be integrated, then everything would have been cured. But if you see now, you see that everything that America was presented to be like this great utopia. Guess what? It's nothing but just a damn ruse. And now, to make matters, even funnier, the whole McKinney, Texas thing, honestly, man, it shows off that police officers are getting really arrogant and they are getting really, ahead of themselves. I'm not saying that all police officers are like this, because there are police officers who do their job. But here's the thing: either A, the good cops, they do nothing when injustice is right there, or two, they're being rid of because they are actually doing the job that they're supposed to do. A, also known as following the rules and making sure certain protocols are being followed. But you know me, and you know the fact that I know a little bit more of my history, and there are other people who would agree and who would say that I agree with what Clash is saying, and I understand where he's coming from, and they will repeat the same thing too. The fact that, and it's a quote, "blue by day and white by night." In case you want to know what that means, it basically means that some of the police officers, it's not probably like 60 or 65% of them, they may not look like it, but some of them are probably not 60, 65, ignore that number, but some of them are probably like, Klansmen underneath that badge. Hence why they follow the suit. Even if some of them don't assume that hood, but they follow the protocol because, you want to know why? Because it's all about pay. It's all about money. If you're harming lives for money, you ain't no better than the goddamn bouncers. And those are from my dead Kennedy heads, too. Now, there's another thing I want to talk about, and it's about the implication that these officers, to some people, are actually doing their jobs. But, the newer generation, both white and black, but mostly blacks, know that something ain't right. Something's not right. This is a setup. And not only a setup, but it's also just overall just messed up, because everybody knows that the whole law thing, especially in America, is crooked. Only certain groups of people have those kind of laws, while other groups of people, they're just going to suffer. Now, some of you may say this is like a drastic outtake from what happened in McKinney, Texas, and how the way this happened with the pool incident. The whole thing with the pool incident, it's very tragic and it's very sad, and it infuriates me because, honestly, this is nothing new. But everybody claimed that America changed. Everybody claimed that America cleaned up its act. No, it did not. It just put on a mask and you fell for it like a goddamn suckers. Now, what makes things even worse is the fact that people who fell for the integrationalist trick and thought that America has changed, except that the new generation is going to change all that. The new generation, if not this generation, the next generation, if not that generation, then the generation after that. It's a generational process. It's not going to happen overnight. If you thought it was going to happen overnight, like I said before, if you fell for the integrationalist trick, it's not going to cure itself. In fact, it's going to become even worse because they just put on like a brilliant mask and you just fell for it. And what did Ms. Louis Farrakhan say about America before? It's like a golden chalice. It looks good on the front. That's the integrational side, the opportunities, the freedom. That's what they say. But once you get into the inside of America, and you want to know what happens? You realize that you stepped into a trap. And you stepped into a cesspool of just god-awful shit. And you think that, oh, wait, I thought this was supposed to be land of the free, home of the brave. How come I feel like I'm in the land of the thieves and home of the damn slaves? I don't have any opportunity, and they judge me by the way I look instead of my own character. See, and people want to pull off that. What about Dr. King? What about his "I Have a Dream" speech? Let me put it off like this: if you say black people who riot, who peacefully protest, who talk about these things and actually deal with racism head on, and then you want to pull off Dr. King, but let me say two things. He believed that, one, riots are the voice of the unheard of, and two, And even though he was down for peace for all people, but he was not stupid. He did say, he said, and this is an excerpt from one of his quotes. He said, "I believe I've integrated my people into a burning house." Now, what do people do when they are in a burning house? Especially when it's set off by an outside entity. They fight it off or they run. They survive. That's what they do. Now, all of you may say, how does this tie in with, McKinney, Texas, and the pool party? Like I said before, it goes back to historical context, and it goes back to what happened back then, and how the way it goes on, how the way it still affects the now. Now, the whole thing with the whole McKinney, Texas thing, I disagree with that, and like I said before, and I'm gonna say, well, fuck the cops, man. Honestly, because what they did to the teenagers, it made no sense. If they were supposed to be professional and they were supposed to handle things at a great disciplined manner, how the hell did you just slam, just a teenage girl's face right on the ground, and then you tell like a young teenager like shut up, and you didn't even bother to say, is there a problem going on here? Like, what happened? Just coming up, you just came up like the goddamn batter ram, just like, boom, like, what's up? Instead of saying like, what happened? What's going on? Because I heard that there was a complaint. That's the problem. That's the problem, because nobody's like, the cops weren't disciplined, and then if you have an undisciplined leader, you have an undisciplined people. Now, looking at the cops, looking at how the way they are supposed to represent the safety of the people, that means the safety of the people is all fucked up. Now, let me get it on like this, and I'm going to keep it real. What happened in McKinney, Texas is nothing new, but I hate it. I hate it because it shows that nothing has changed in America. As much as I would love to believe that America has changed, as much as I would love to believe that America has, rid itself of that ugliness that is known as racism, it hasn't. It's still an opportunist, lecherous country. That's what it is. And overall, it's still exploitive. It didn't change. Nothing has changed in America. I understand that it will take like a generation or two or three just to at least mend the scars of racism, because we cannot cure it entirely. Maybe our children can cure it. Maybe our grandchildren can cure it. Definitely our great grandchildren, if they have the tools to do it. And McKinney, Texas is nothing new. And the fact that I'm bringing out all this historical, not only this historical knowledge, but historical fact, and how the way I'm bringing it not only from a black perspective, but also from a perspective that can potentially be dealt with this hand. And I understand some of you may say that it's unprofessional to say, fuck the cops, fuck the police. But you know what, man? I gotta say what I gotta say. Because some of them will say, fuck us. And they will do it right to your face. Right to our faces. And if you turn a blind eye on an injustice, then honestly, man, how can you call yourself a good person? And what do they say about good people? If good people do nothing, that's evil enough. And with that, YouTube, that is my take on what happened in, McKinney, Texas, with the pool party. And, overall, that's just my thought process on it. If you agree, then you agree. If you disagree, well, I guess you just disagree. I can't help you with that. Hope y'all have a great day today. Like I always say, out one, keep the peace. And if you see violence, and they definitely bring violence to your hand, best be prepared to defend yourselves. And please, always be yourselves. Later.